Franz Kafka once wrote that writing felt like a form of prayer. He never knew who was listening, and he always suspected no one approved. This suspicion, this deep-seated feeling of being watched and judged, followed him everywhere, from the crowded, ancient streets of Prague, where he was born in 1883, to the quiet solitude of his own room. He spent his entire life feeling watched, even when he was completely alone. A significant part of this feeling came from his father, Hermann Kafka. Hermann was certainty in human form, large, loud, and overwhelmingly proud. He entered rooms like a judgment, his presence filling every corner, leaving little space for a quiet, sensitive boy like Franz. In the face of this force of nature, Kafka learned to shrink, to make himself smaller, to exist in the margins. Dinners were a performance, with Hermann speaking and Franz listening, absorbing the silent pressure. Years later, Franz would pour out his feelings in a long, unsent letter, writing, "You terrified me." Hermann, of course, never replied. Kafka grew up surrounded by expectation. Love, in his family, wasn't a gentle thing. It was loud. It shouted. And it always came with conditions. Approval was something to be earned, a prize for meeting unspoken standards. In this environment, silence felt much safer than speech. So, as a child, Kafka retreated into the world of books. Books were a refuge. They didn't interrupt, they didn't make demands, and they never judged. They allowed him to escape the exhausting performance of daily life. While other boys played outside, moving with a freedom he couldn't comprehend, Kafka observed them from a distance, wondering how they did it. School was another arena for performance. It rewarded obedience, and Kafka, being a quiet and diligent student, excelled. Teachers praised him, but the praise felt hollow. He felt like an imposter, receiving credit for a role he was playing, not for who he truly was. "I was praised for someone else." Guy once wrote a sentence that haunted him, encapsulating the deep disconnect between his inner self and his outer life. This feeling of being an imposter followed him into his professional life. He studied law not out of passion, but out of a sense of duty and a need for structure. The rigid, logical world of law felt safe, a predictable framework in a life filled with emotional uncertainty. He completed his degree efficiently, without any celebration. Adulthood didn't arrive with a bang. It came quietly, like a summons he was obligated to answer. Kafka found a job at the Workers' Accident Insurance Institute. By all accounts, he was an excellent employee, punctual, careful, and effective. He showed genuine compassion, helping injured workers navigate the bureaucracy to get the support they deserved. This dedication often surprised people who only saw his reserved exterior. His co-workers saw a reliable, if quiet, man. They didn't see the bone-deep exhaustion he carried, the constant dread that hummed just beneath the surface. Kafka was an expert at hiding his true self. The daytime belonged to duty, to the performance of a competent professional. But the night belonged to truth. He would wait for the house to fall silent, for the city to sleep. For Kafka, silence was permission to finally exist. And in that silence, he wrote. He would often stand at his desk, sometimes shaking with the effort, as words rushed out of him with a desperate urgency. Writing wasn't a hobby. It was survival. It was the only way he could process the world, the only way he could make sense of the absurdity he felt all around him. One night, in a single, feverish burst of creativity, he wrote the story that would become the Metamorphosis. A man, Gregor Samsa, wakes up to find he is transformed into a monstrous insect. His first thought isn't horror or confusion. It's anxiety about being late for work. Kafka reportedly laughed out loud while writing it. He later read the story to his close friends, and he laughed again at the absurd tragedy of it all. But the room was frozen in a stunned silence. Confused, Kafka asked them, "Why is this not funny?" That was Kafka's humor: pain without apology, absurdity without explanation, truth without any offer of comfort. It was a humor born from seeing the world with terrifying clarity. This internal conflict defined his relationships as well. Kafka wanted love desperately, but he feared it even more. The idea of connection felt dangerous, and the thought of true exposure, of someone seeing the real him, felt potentially fatal. He met a woman named Felice and was immediately captivated. He began writing to her, and soon the letters became a lifeline, a torrent of words pouring out his hopes and fears. He wrote to her, "I need you," and in the next breath, "I must escape you." When Felice, understandably confused, asked which was true, Kafka's honest answer was, both. They became engaged, but the prospect of marriage sent Kafka into a panic. It felt like an interrogation, a lifelong trial where he would constantly be asked, Who are you really? He imagined domestic life the noise, the obligations, the permanent sand it felt like a cage. He broke off the engagement only to suffer deeply from the loss. He went back to her and then fled again. As he told his friend, marriage is a trial. I already know the verdict. Friendship was easier, especially with his closest companion, Max Brod. With Max, Kafka could breathe. Max believed in Kafka's genius completely, even when Kafka himself was convinced of his own failure. Max would tell him, "You are great," and Kafka would reply, "I am a mistake." This back and forth was the rhythm of their friendship. Brod saw the talent. Kafka only saw the struggle. Kafka wrote constantly, but he also destroyed his work with the same relentless energy. He burned pages regularly, terrified of imperfection, convinced that his writing was nothing more than fragments, failures, unfinished thoughts. What he saw as broken, others would later see as visionary. When he wrote The Trial, the story of a man arrested and prosecuted for a crime he knows nothing about, Kafka dismissed it as incomplete. Max Brod, however, saw its power. "It is exact," he told his friend. He recognized that Kafka wasn't just writing fiction. He was documenting the modern condition of anxiety and alienation. Illness had been a quiet companion for much of Kafka's life, but eventually, tuberculosis took hold, weakening him physically. Time became tangible, visible. Every breath was a conscious effort. He moved between sanatoriums, between fleeting hopes and new loves, but nothing ever seemed to stay. He wanted closeness, but not possession. He wanted solitude, but not loneliness. He wanted to be understood, but without the exhausting work of having to explain himself. His diaries from this period are a testament to his incredible honesty. They are brutal, funny, and profoundly insightful. He wrote, "I am free. That is why I am lost. And on another day, I failed today. I feel relieved." For Kafka, writing was the act of opening wounds and examining them, not closing them. The truth mattered more than healing, and he accepted the immense personal cost of that conviction. As the end drew near, a strange sense of calm replaced the lifelong panic. Acceptance softened him. Knowing his time was short, he made one final request to his dearest friend. He asked Max Brod to burn everything, all of his manuscripts, his diaries, his letters. He wanted to leave nothing behind, to erase the evidence of what he considered a failed life. Max agreed. He looked his dying friend in the eye and promised to honor his wish. But internally, he had already decided to refuse. This single act of loving disobedience would change the course of literary history. Franz Kafka died in 1924 at the age of 40. He died believing he had failed as a son, as a lover, and most tragically, as a writer. The world, however, would disagree. Loudly, after his death, thanks to Max Brod, Kafka's work began to spread, first quietly, then like a wildfire. People read his stories and saw themselves. They recognized the crushing weight of bureaucracy, the absurdity of faceless authority, the anxiety of living in a world that often makes no sense. Kafka had given a name and a language to a feeling that millions shared but couldn't articulate. His descriptions of offices felt hauntingly familiar. His depiction of courts felt deeply personal. He became famous, unwillingly, influential, accidentally, and understood only posthumously. He probably would have hated all the attention. The irony is that Kafka, who felt so broken and out of place, was actually one of the most precise observers of the human soul. He listened carefully to the silent anxieties of his time and wrote them down with unflinching honesty. He showed us alienation clearly, confusion respectfully, and fear without shame. That was his true and unintentional gift. Franz Kafka never found a way to escape the labyrinth of his own mind, so he mapped it instead. And that map, drawn from a place of profound pain and brilliant insight, still works. We are still using it today to navigate our own complex world. He did not solve the riddle of life. He described it accurately, and sometimes that's more than enough. Sometimes it's everything. If this story of a life felt familiar, if you recognize both the pain and the strange humor in it, consider subscribing for more stories that explore the depths of the human experience. Thank you for watching.